WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Thanks for joining us here on Flashpoint. I'm Ben Thompson. Our focus today, redistricting. Granted, it's not the sexiest of topics, but it's perhaps the most influential issue in politics. Happens every 10 years after the census. With shifting populations, redistricting guarantees, or at least tries to, that you get equal representation in government. A city councilman in South Charlotte doesn't represent more people than one in East Charlotte. Your member of Congress doesn't have less sway than a congressman from, say, Hollywood. The process currently underway here in Charlotte for city council seats at the statewide level for state legislative districts and congressional districts. Take a look at this. According to a rough local level 2020 census data, if all things are equal, Charlotte's 7 city council districts should be about 125,000 people a district. However, take a look. These are the district sizes currently. District 7 is the only district that's even close to that size. District 1, 5, and 6 are below that size. District 2, 3, and 4 are all over the size, meaning that some folks don't have as much of a say at city council members as other people who live in other parts of town. Joining us today, city council members Malcolm Graham and Ed Driggs, both of you on the redistricting ad hoc committee. In fact, Councilman Graham, you're the chair of the committee. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Good to see you.
All right. Many folks in your seat have struggled with this, both at a local level, at a state level, at a federal level, about the fair way to redistrict. And it's been debated for decades and decades and decades. And with some success, some people have found what they think is a fair way of doing it. Councilman Graham, I'll start with you since you're the chair of the committee. How are you trying, because you've been criticized by some already as we start this process, how are you trying to approach this in a fair and equitable way to make sure folks of different political stripes are going to be represented at the government center?
Well, thank you for the question. The mayor appointed me as well as 3 other council members, including Councilmember Driggs, as mayor and Phipps, to form the redistricting committee. We said right from the very start that we wanted to be open, fair, balanced, educate the community, let the data lead us where it should, make sure that the maps that we draw are representative of the city, and to do it in an open fashion. And so you mentioned a criticism. It's a criticism of one, right? And so even before we put pen to paper, I think that my goal and objective, as well as the committee, is to produce maps that are fair and balanced, that represents both parties, Democrats and Republicans. So I think at the end of the process, I think everyone is going to be reasonably happy. This is not a trigonometry problem or a calculus problem. It's really simple adding and subtracting, adding precincts to where it's needed and taking precincts away from where the growth is goes beyond the 125,000. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we can make the type of progress necessary locally. I think what happens at the federal and on the state level certainly has some bearings, but again, Charlotte is reasonably simple, compact. The numbers speak for themselves. I think the 5-2 balance on council in reference to districts is something that I'm working to make sure that at the end of the day that stay intact. So I think folks will be happy with the progress that we're going to make and the maps that we're going to release. You
say it's simple addition and subtraction, but we know depending on where you add and where you subtract, it could impact the makeup of city council. Councilman Driggs, that it could end up being that you end up being the only Republican on the next council.
I want to say, for one, there wasn't just one of us that had questions, and I was disappointed because I thought there was a smooth path forward. I thought we had a way to accomplish this and sidestep a lot of the ugliness that has occurred around other redistrictings. And then this committee, of which Mr. Graham and I are a member, decided in my absence, when I arrived late for a meeting because of a doctor's appointment, to make a couple of changes to the criteria that we use. And they deleted the suggestion that we should try to achieve partisan balance or be fair about partisan questions in this process. And the only effect that had, in my mind, was to increase the chances that this became a disputed, controversial process And so I don't think it was helpful. I thought the way it was done before I got to the meeting was slippery. And I'm not surprised that we're now hearing from another member of council about gamesmanship. And we're now facing the specter of an argument about partisan outcomes, implications, when we didn't necessarily have to. I think there might have been a smooth way forward, but the gauntlet has been thrown down, and we'll see how it plays out.
Let me correct my friend, Councilmember Driggs. He's absolutely right. Those votes were taken when he was not there. He was late for the meeting, and as soon as he arrived at the meeting, we informed him in reference to the action that we took. We certainly did delete that as a criteria, but we did not delete it as a goal. And that's the goal of the committee, from my perspective as the chairman, to make sure that we have balance throughout the city, that we remain, that we work really, really hard to produce maps that maintain the status quo, which is 5 Democratic districts and 2 Republican districts. There'll be a series of maps that reflects that. Others will reflect other things, but again, the council will make that decision. And so while it was removed as a criteria, it was never removed as a goal. And like I said earlier, I think if we would just trust the process, especially one of my colleagues in City Council, that this argument or this debate in reference to whether or not we're going to gerrymandering or those type of nonsense will be just that at the end of the day, just a lot of nonsense from my perspective.
We're going to stop right there, and we're going to have more on what is a heated discussion about something that sounds benign, redistricting, coming up on the other side of this break. Welcome back to Flashpoint. We continue our conversation with Charlotte City Council members Malcolm Graham and Ed Driggs on redistricting. Do you think it's nonsense, or do you think it's ridiculous, though, when people compare this to what Republicans are criticized for at the statewide level when it comes to redistricting?
Well, no one is surgically removing Republicans from the district, right? That's a phrase that a federal court judge used in terms of the precision in reference to what Republicans did in Raleigh. And again, I'll say for the third time, it is our goal to have the status quo remain, which is 5 Democratic seats and 2 Republican seats. And I think we just need to trust the process. We've already started drawing maps. We just rescheduled a meeting that was scheduled for Monday for Wednesday to allow Mr. Driggs to be present. So when those maps are released, he can see them all for himself. And so we're trying to be open, transparent, and we're going to have 2 public engagement sessions for the public. We're going to add some more public education sessions based on the meeting I had yesterday. So I think at the end of the day, I think the council will make a decision, and we're going to have 3 or 4 options for them to choose from, and it's my goal as the committee chairman to be fair and balanced. Okay,
Mr. Driggs, do you take him at his word that he's trying to be fair and balanced and transparent about this, and that there should be 2 Republicans in an ideal situation with the others Democrats on City Council?
Well, ask yourself whether you think it makes sense that a vote was taken on partisan provisions of our criteria when the Republican member of the committee was not there yet, but was coming. It was done early in the meeting. I was there for a good portion of the meeting, and the chair characterized the vote as unanimous several times because it was taken when I wasn't there. I do agree that this doesn't compare, is not analogous to the actions Republicans took elsewhere, because I think there is a way forward, a smooth way forward, that we could have accomplished without the step of removing these criteria. And all that does is it shines a light on the question. The District 6, which is Mr. Bokhari's district, is, I would describe as a purple district in the sense that we now have a Democrat serving on the Board of County Commissioners there, and it is very much in play. It is certainly very competitive. There's a lot of sensitivity on this subject. And I think to sort of shine a light on the question with this really unnecessary action of removing those provisions made things more difficult for us. I don't think the outcome will be affected much, frankly. I think it would have been fine if we'd left those things in. But this has now highlighted the subject. And Mr. Graham, this is what you do in council meetings too. You sit there smiling and sneering broadly when people speak and say something you don't like. It's a very discourteous way to behave. I would appreciate it if you'd refrain from it.
Well, Mr. Driggs, let's say this. I wish you would express all those points at the committee meeting. You expressed none. We introduced to you when you walked in onto the screen exactly what we did, and you had no comment at all. So
I said I hoped that we would try to respect the fact that bipartisan representation on a body is better. I acknowledge that the numbers are such, as I am now, that the numbers were such that we would probably end up in the same place, but I didn't appreciate it. I'd just come from a procedure at a doctor's office, and I was ambushed at that meeting.
No, you were
Why
not.
did you hold the vote before I got there? Why did you hold the vote before I got there, Mr. Graham? Answer that question. I was going to be at the meeting, the only Republican who was going to be at the meeting, and you held the vote before I got there.
It was the first item on the agenda, Mr. Driggs. You were
And
right.
Mr. Chair, you had the absolute discretion to change the sequence of the meeting. It was within your authority in order to have a representative of the other party there when the vote was taken on partisan issues related to redistricting.
Mr. Driggs.
It is slippery.
First, it was not slippery, and we told you exactly what we did and why we did it, and you said nothing, not a word. Not a word, Mr. Driggs. You know that. Not a word. So
I said exactly what I just told you. I said it's on the record.
No, you did not, sir.
I said the numbers probably will point that way, so maybe it makes sense to do that, but I sincerely hope that we will respect the fact that having representation by both parties on council. Mr. Graham, you have 9 members. You don't have a need to pull stunts like this. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of that would make you do something like this?
You're factually incorrect on a lot of things that you're saying here today. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not disrespecting you at all. I just basically said on 3 different occasions, it is my goal to produce a map that remains and keeps the status quo in play.
It was not transparent or fair to hold that vote when I wasn't there.
Because it was the first on the, Mr. Driggs, you're just being disingenuous, like your colleague, right? Because you're really being disingenuous in terms of how that meeting happened and your presence or your absence, right? I said, as soon as you got on the screen, this is the action that we took. It was the first item on the agenda. There was no slippery slope, sir. We just kind of pointed out that based on removing that, we wanted to make sure that we produce realistic expectation. It is not a criteria, but it is a goal. And that's a goal that I'm working towards. And I think you'll be pleasantly pleased when you come back in town where we're at with these maps.
All right, gentlemen.
I'm a committee chair too, and I know that a committee chair has the absolute discretion to make a change in the agenda or the sequence of events in the agenda when circumstances indicate. You should have appreciated that circumstances indicated that that conversation needed to take place when the representative from the other party was present at the meeting, because that's why we had a bipartisan representation in that committee.
I wish you would have expressed those comments at the meeting, which you did not.
All right. Gentlemen, I've got to cut it off. We're out of time now, but I hope for the sake of the folks of Charlotte that they end up with representative government at the government center, because that's certainly important. And we invite you to come back and discuss this further in the weeks ahead. Council members Driggs and Graham, thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
More Flashpoint after this.